It's Reefer Madness, the podcast, with Trevor and Kirk.
Kirk, we're back.
Yes, my friend, we are back. How are you? And how excited are you about talking about mold?
So excited. And yes, I made you get up early to talk about mold. It is literal minus 30 here today. So
There's no
what
mold
else would
growing
we be doing? Very, very little, very slowly. Maybe spores, though, and we talk a little
Yes,
bit about
true.
spores.
True.
So I am Trevor Schufelt. I am the pharmacist, and you are.
I'm Kirk Nyquist. I am the registered nurse.
And together we are Reefer Madness.
Yes.
So I'm excited about this one.
I know you. I know you are. This is a very geeky one. I'm going to
Very
give the
geeky.
audience. I'm going to give the audience a head up. We're going to be talking about science and mold
Science and mold and irradiation.
and irradiation.
So I'll do I think I'd tell the cookie story every time irradiation comes up. I'm going to do the cookie story one more time. So I grew up next to a nuclear reactor, a nuclear research facility.
Yes.
And one of my hockey coaches in high school, one of his sort of areas was irradiation. So, they were irradiating things like carbon fiber to make them stronger for things like airplane parts and stuff. But as sort of a public relations thing, they irradiated some flour, made it into cookies, and gave out the irradiated cookies at, public events. And I have eaten several irradiated cookies, and it didn't do anything to my hair at all.
No, except you glow at night sometimes.
Something like that.
Your wife can read off of your glow.
Something like that. So, real quick, we got a couple people from McGill. Well, the paper was more, but Dr. Saji George and Mamta Rani were the two we've got on the file. They irradiated some cannabis they had some cannabis irradiated. They worked on the what is left over afterwards. So when it comes to cannabis, irradiation is there to get rid of the bad other stuff growing in it. So mold or fungi. Some mold or fungi produce toxins. So those are the mycotoxins that you hear about. Plus some bacteria, plus maybe some other stuff. Cannabis is a natural product. Things get on it. Things grow. Cannabis is grown and stored in humid conditions. So you have some of this mold, bacteria, endotoxins, mycotoxins on it. We'll talk a little bit afterwards how harmful that might be, but we're mostly, in this case, thinking about medical use for like someone whose immune system isn't so good, like an HIV patient, a cancer patient undergoing chemo. So those are the kind of things to keep in mind. Before I let our guests chat about what they did, anything else you want to tell the audience on the way in?
Well, just where did you find this story? Because it's truly, as you sent it to me, you pushed it to me. I Googled it and I found it pretty much everywhere. Like this research is everywhere, like in the publications.
Yeah. We, as if you've been following our social media, we are trying to, because there's so many stories out there, we're trying to just put some headlines into our social media feeds, because A, we think they're interesting, B, we can't fit everything we find into the podcast, and C, frankly, we get some interesting reactions. And this is one that was in our social media feed, extra bonus for it being a Canadian study. But oh my goodness, people got excited about irradiation, and maybe we'll talk about that a little more afterwards.
Sure, let's go into it. Let's listen to the interview.
So, Dr. George, Mamta, we're going to just ask you to start by introducing yourselves, and then we'll talk about your paper.
Excellent. And thank you, Mr. Trevor. I really appreciate you calling us on for this podcast. Myself, Saji George, and I am an associate professor at the Department of Food Science and Agriculture Chemistry. I'm also chair of the department at the moment. So this is from University of McGill, Quebec, Canada. So we work on many aspects relating to the safety of food and food-related compounds, and then came to us, since the cannabis was legalized, came to us to verify what is the safety of things that are going in cannabis domain, and that's how we started this work. Other than that, we also work with many of those finding solution for these kind of challenges, making our food system, food supply chain, and other kind of producers safe and sustainable. So we work with bacteria that actually produces some of the biostimulants and biocontrol agents, which actually protects the plant from these kind of toxins or these kind of pathogenic microorganisms. That forms one of the major domain of our work. Apart from that, we also look into some of those materials that we consume that are getting into our diet, for example, nanomaterials. How are they, and what is the implication of those nanomaterials in food in specific disease conditions like intestinal bowel disease, etc. So that forms to summarize, is majorly we are working on safety of food, and also we're working a little bit on the sustainability part of agriculture. So Mamta, over to you for your introduction.
Myself, Mamta Rani, and I am assisting Dr. Saji in all these projects he mentioned. And we are mainly working on biostimulants, but this project, what we will be discussing today, was on mycotoxin of cannabis. And we will be discussing like how we started, what we did, and what are the outcome of this project. Dr. George will explain it more.
Thank you. So just for the audience, I'll read the title and then we'll talk about the paper. So, detection of mycotoxic fungi and residual mycotoxins in cannabis buds following gamma irradiation. So, how about give us a little bit of a background? So why, and you talk about a lot in the paper, but why does fungus on cannabis matter? Why would a cannabis consumer care?
Very important question. So as we know, nowadays, many food producers or these cannabis producers that are coming into the market, they are not sterile. And fungus actually has a major role because these guys can grow on diverse kind of matrices. And cannabis being grown under humid conditions, cannabis being that bud being very moist and kind of stuff, they are particularly vulnerable to fungal attack. Fungal attack in the sense fungus spores, they can go and then they can sprout there and the fungus can grow. And obviously when the fungus grow, they actually produces these secondary metabolites called mycotoxins, which they produce for their own purpose to make them more competent in that matrix or in the microenvironment where they are growing. But those secondary metabolites are extremely toxic to human. And so, and I have to also mention that the fungus is not just getting from the growing or the place where the cannabis is grown, but down the lane for the food in the supply chain, they can enter at any node. It can be during the storage, it can be during their transportation, or at a retailer, for example. So at any stage, these kind of funguses can come in contact with these kind of substance, and when they grow, they can actually produce toxin. So there is this question about monitoring the cannabis producers for their sterility in terms and their suitability in terms of consumption. So that question, as you can see, has not been addressed too much. There are some publications about in the domain in literature talking about the identification of mycotoxins or these mycotoxin producing fungus in cannabis producers. But then we ask that question, like the industry standards, the best practice for processing these produce in order to get rid of those kind of obnoxious pathogens or their metabolite, the best practice is to subject it to gamma radiation. There are many other ways of stabilization, but gamma radiation is the number one in terms of its stringency or efficiency in removing the pathogens, in removing their spores, and also in removing their metabolite. So now we ask that question, is that really capable of removing it? Why I stress on that really part is when you test in conventional, like if you take a cannabis produce that is coming into the market and subject it to the normal industry standard kind of testing protocol, you may see it's sterile. It's good. There is, it's good to go kind of. But we ask this question, First, is gamma radiation good enough to completely remove the spores and the mycotoxin and also the reminiscence of these DNA fragments that are that in a part of the genes that actually are in the formation of this mycotoxin? And also we ask this question, current testing methods, are they good enough to test so, in order to pick up the reminiscence of these obnoxious agents present on the cannabis produced?
Okay, and you did mention in the paper, so I'll just highlight for people, I'm an otherwise healthy adult, so, me inhaling a fungal mycotoxin might be good, might be bad, might affect me, might not, but it seems to be an especially big deal in the medical end of cannabis if we have someone who's immunosuppressed, a cancer patient undergoing chemotherapy, an HIV patient, other people who, for whatever reason, their immune system isn't up to snuff, inhaling bacteria, fungus, mycotoxins might be especially bad for them. So seems to be an especially big deal for the medicinal end of things.
Exactly. So I was coming to that point. So what with these kind of things present in these producers? Like if it is a very low quantity, whatever it is, if it is passing the industry standard, why should we bother about this? That's the question, right? So, if it is a normal healthy person, as you mentioned, may not be much of an issue. Obviously, there is issue, but it may not manifest immediately. Like, it may add on to the smoking, for example, it may add on to the burden to the lung, like the toxic impact or the implications on the lung. But this issue becomes a very evident and an immediately hazardous for people with these kind of medical condition, where their immune system is not up to the mark. When are the patients or people who are taking it for medicinal purpose? Usually maybe undergoing a palliative therapy, pain management, or maybe for some other reasons, people may be lowered immunity. People may have some issues with the immunity. And that's where even a single spore actually matters. If the thing that goes into the lung, then there is now protection provided by the body through the immune system. As a result, it can actually manifest as a infection of the lung, or the mycotoxin, if the smallest quantity that is present, can actually cause injury to the lung tissue. Yes.
Can I add something here?
Go ahead.
Absolutely, please.
Yeah, because in US there are more than 19 cases reported so far of the same, like when people were consuming mycotoxin in the cannabis, and there were so many fatalities. But somehow, I don't know, I did not see many reports in Canada since cannabis got legalized. Only few cases where it was just this reaction, like no fatality, no complication, just little bit like some adverse reaction, they call it. So I don't know whether our doctors are very careful in prescribing, or our producers are producing it very carefully. But in US, I see there were 19 cases reported in last in 10-15 years. There were some cases in 1988 and 89, I guess, and more are after 2010. So I am really there is a report on cannabis in Health Canada, but not many reports. I'm really surprised. Like, is it because of the regulation? It's the same regulation. And I have really concern about the regulation because mycotoxin in cannabis is treated same as in food testing industry. It's the same. Okay. Because it should be actually different. That's what our biggest concern here. It shouldn't be treated as other food commodities. It should be treated special, actually.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. I'm glad that we don't have a lot of case reports in Canada either, and I'd love to think it's because our growers in Canada are especially careful. But yeah, I can see why it should be different for something we inhale into our lungs than something that goes through our stomach. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, maybe I can add on to that. Why it is lesser in Canada? I mean, it was very interesting. I was just reading about the Health Canada report where they actually looked into these kind of pesticides, mycotoxins, heavy metals in legal and illegal sources. The cannabis that is, sourced from legal and illegal sources. And they show that when it is coming from illegal sources, almost all the samples, they are actually having these kind of a presence of mycotoxins or pesticides or heavy metals. All those are likely to cause, injuries to the lung or to the person. So I believe in down the border, I'm not sure how far is the legal producers getting into the market, or it may not be that stringency in the production, and the testing is as stringent as Canada. So I just wanted to add on that part. Now, once we legalized it, it becomes a little bit better in terms of the product quality. But you asked that question. Why do we have to?
Keep going.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm going to be quiet now. You continue.
I just wanted to add one more point. We discussed why are we bothered about the presence of mycotoxin in this product from a person's medical point of view. Something like, if there is a compromised immune system, it may be more deleterious. But also, this is a workplace safety concern. Like, there are people who are working in these kind of industries. It is actually a closed kind of a place where there is a high humidity, high presence of this, and there is a lots of this. If you take the particles from these vicinities, there are likely to be presence of these spores or the mycotoxins or the fungus spores are likely to be present. So it may also show that there is a chance of an implication for workplace safety as well. I mean, it's not directly related to the work we did, but it implies that if there is a presence of these funguses or spores in the produce, obviously we can imagine that could also be present in the atmosphere where it is grown.
Yeah, because
I wouldn't have thought of that. That's a good point. Go ahead, Mamta.
To preserve the potency of the cannabis buds, it has to be processed under certain temperature, and humidity has to be. So in that environment, it's very good environment, like perfect for fungi to harbor. So if there is even small spores there, they can, in that humid and high temperature, it can really flourish. A big concern actually for the workers who is handling and who is working for their health is a huge concern.
Okay, so now let's move on to the actual paper. So we've got the problem sort of laid out. What did you guys do, and then what did you find?
Great. So I just mentioned that industry practice for sterilizing this is through, there are different strategies, but one is the gamma radiation. Mm-hmm. It's a very good method. So first we worked with an industry partner where they supplied us the materials which is not gone through that gamma radiation and the materials that is gone through the gamma radiation to see the effectiveness. We tested these materials for the presence of the fungus altogether. So what type of fungus are present. So we have done culturing them to visualize them. And also we have done something that we cannot see. We can actually go through another tool called metagenomics. So we extract all the DNA and then we isolate, and then we run through those kind of instruments which can tell us what kind of a fungus or varieties of funguses are present, and also bacteria that are present. So we do those kind of metagenomics or ITS, all these to actually identify the microbiome generally to say what type of bacteria and fungus present in this sample. What is our finding? The finding is gamma radiation is really good in reducing those pathogens. In fact, most of those obnoxious or pathogenic funguses and bacteria, they will be taken care of. Which means, if you are doing the proper way of gamma radiation, it will actually kill or eradicate those kind of most of those funguses and bacteria. But to our surprise, what we find is it is not completely sterilizing it. Gamma radiation is supposed to be a sterilizing agent, but it's a radiation. So obviously there may be shadow regions where this extremely difficult kind of form, especially the spores of the fungus, can still stay, and it is not completely eradicating or eliminating it. In a sense, to say that it is not a total sterilization protocol. So that's what our first finding from that part. And then we also extended these examination into samples that we collected from the legal sources. So, we sample from SQD, SQDC.
SQDC. Actually, it was unknown samples. We cannot.
So we don't know who produces it, but we are actually blindfold. We are taking from legal sources, and we conducted the same kind of assays. And there we also, I have to also tell you that we are not really restricted to the ELISA-based assay. We also went on to mass HPLC-based analysis in order to see the compound beyond what we can actually be detected by the traditional assays. So when we do that, what we identify is in traditional assays, you may find it absent, which means this in the industry standard wise, these are the standard protocols that are used. It is below the detection limit of these traditional assays that are used by the industry. But if you are going a little bit more like, advanced instruments, then we can pick up the signals of mycotoxins, even those are present in the samples that are coming into the market. Although most of the sample, I should say, they are pretty good in terms of the fungal load or in terms of the mycotoxin. But if you are actually doing with advanced instrumentation to pick up the toxins as molecules, or to look for the genes that is corresponding to the production of these mycotoxin, if you are using PCR-based techniques, we will be able to find the presence of these things in the many of those samples that came to the market. Especially one sample was really bad, right? So in terms of, this is also coming to the, legal sources. Illegal in the sense is, where we can, it is presumed to be a good, high quality, showing that there are cracks in the system, in the quality control of these materials that are getting into the market. You want to add something? Yeah.
Actually, big concern was viable spores, because viable spores, they cannot be detected with even HPLC or LCMS, these advanced instruments. They will be detected only with very traditional culturing techniques, because these spores cannot be detected, and they can even tolerate these gamma radiation or heat sterilization very easily, because they have very thick spore wall that can protect them from heat and radiation. And these spores, even a single spore, it can be inhaled by any immunocompromised person and can colonize their lungs, will be very, very fatal. So presence of spores was big concern, and I found one sample was having spores of Aspergillus flavus that produce aflatoxin. There were some other like minor, but this was the big concern. Aflatoxin producing fungus spore presence was detected in one of those samples.
No, and that's fascinating. And we won't. People can read the paper if they want to see, that you did, culturing, and then you did qPCR, and then you did ELISA, and like you said, you did some HPLC. We'll leave some of the details, but so you did find that if you use basically more stringent testing, you're finding, not everything, not all, but we're finding where it would have normally passed, we'll call it Health Canada standards, that there actually still are some harmful both spores and mycotoxins in there. So now that you've found that, did you put any thought into what the industry should do to, what should we do about that?
Very good question. Before answering that question, let me first tell you, when you find a mycotoxin that is present, which is not, according to the normal industry standard, this producers or this product may be good to go. But you have to understand there is no tolerable limit for mycotoxin. Even usually we say 5 ppb. That is I think you should, according to the Health Canada standards, we put some regulatory limit for the presence of the mycotoxin that is allowed in the products. You have to understand that is mostly related to our ability to detect. Not to say that that one molecule of mycotoxin can be tolerated. No, it is the body. I mean, there is no tolerable limit for mycotoxin. I just want to say that. So our finding that using advanced instruments, we still can pick up the signal is significant when it comes to even normal human being. And obviously, there is more concern when it is a immunocompromised person. Now, coming to the next question, what can we do about it? There are a couple of things. So this is once we identify the, this is about the risk mitigation. How can we reduce the risk of mycotoxins and fungus present in cannabis? First of all, it shows that industry has to have some stringent control over the production. So it shows that obviously, I mean, like I alluded to you before, that when Health Canada's report shows that illegal sources contain more of these things than the legal sources, which means when it is legally procured, there are some industry standards, good agriculture practice that is going in, which actually helps in reducing these mycotoxins. So obviously, that is the first thing. We have to improve the good agriculture practices or practices that are put in place in production stage itself. And so the growers should be mindful about it, and so that we can reduce it. So we have to implement those kind of antimicrobial, basically, to take out the fungus from the facility. So whatever steps that we can do or controls that we can do should be exercised. It also brings to the point that at regulatory stage, we have to implement stringent testing criteria, like looking for whether it is truly devoid of these kind of funguses, the live strain, live spores, and the mycotoxin presence. So that means we have to go beyond some of those. Right now, the standards that are put in place is not good enough to detect. So probably we have to make more stringent kind of analysis of these samples. Basically, it can be an HPLC-based method or a MS-based method where we can actually pick up the signals of these chemicals. Now, having said these two mitigation things, I have to say that still it will be very difficult to actually get rid of, first of all, getting rid of a mycotoxin or a fungus that is established on a produce. I told you, gamma radiation is the best in practice. That's the best industry practice to actually sterilize the product. But the thing is, so that tells us that we have to prevent the generation of mycotoxin at the very early stage, and also throughout these supply chain. So one of the things that we are working on is to help the producers, the growers, to actually produce quality produce which does not have, or which will minimize the chance of fungus establishing on plant. So that is through biocontrol. We have identified bacterial strains, for example, that will prevent these aflatoxin producing or DON producing. DON is another mycotoxin producing fungus from establishing the plant onto the plant. So they produce some chemical compounds. These are like a biosurfactant that actually targets this kind of fungus, and then they can actually prevent the fungus from establishing on the plant. So at that production stage, we can actually help the plant to grow faster, better, because it's also a biostimulant property, and also control the fungus from establishing onto the plant. If they are not establishing on the plant, they are not going to produce the mycotoxin. So that is the idea there. So we are working with the growers to actually and our preliminary research show that it is really good in terms of reduction in the fungus itself. So even before the gamma radiation, we can see there's a substantial reduction in the number of fungus colonies that we can count, and also we are now testing on the mycotoxin in these kind of samples, and we find it is substantially reduced in comparison to the control. So these are some of the strategies that we can implement in order to reduce the burden or the risk from mycotoxin or the fungus that causes this kind of infection in human. Mamta?
So as Dr. Saji mentioned, use of biocontrols, it will be actually working like taking charge of two things at a time. Like first, we can control mycotoxin and like enhance the growth. At the same time, we can reduce the use of chemicals, because another problem in cannabis is the presence of pesticides or fungicides. This is big because they are using it a lot to prevent. So by using these biocontrols, we can actually take control of those things also. So it will be really good idea to promote these biocontrols in cannabis industry, because this way we can control pesticides and other chemicals, or even because whenever we use any chemical pesticides or even fertilizers, they will always bring heavy metals and other toxic substance with it. So by using these, everything will be controlled. It will help in all other aspects.
Exactly. So yeah.
Oh, and that's very cool. And it comes up over and over again how good the cannabis plant is about bioaccumulating heavy metals wherever they sort of get their claws into it. A little bit outside of what you guys studied, but I know people are going to ask us, do you have any thoughts one way or the other if irradiation is bad for the cannabis plant? If it blows up cannabinoids, if it gets rid of terpenes, if it harms we'll call it the value of the cannabis plant by using irradiation at all? We've definitely run into people who are dead set against irradiation ever being used around any cannabis plant, but I think they're missing the fact that we've got to weigh what irradiation may or may not do to the plant versus we got to get rid of some of the mycotoxins. So any thoughts about what irradiation does to the plant or the compounds in the plant? I know a little outside of your study, but any thoughts on that?
Great. So, like I mentioned, there are different methods that the industry is employing to get rid of this mycotoxin and also reduce the pathogen burden on the produce. So there are, for example, ozone treatment. There is this light, like a UV light, and there is this kind of gamma radiation.
Plasma.
There is a called plasma. There's a new technology that is emerging also. All these techniques, they have their merits and demerits. And obviously, gamma radiation we are giving high intensity gamma rays, passing it through the produce, so through the sample, for example, and then actually what it does is basically it take care of the DNA. It basically causes those degradation of the nucleic acid, and that's how the fungus and the spores and also this mycotoxin, this as a molecule will be degraded when the gamma radiation is passing through. So that concern about whether it has a side effect on other compounds, it is likely because this is a high energy radiation that is passing through those chemicals as well. Like, if you're talking about THC or CBD or other flavonoids or terpenoids that are present in, they can actually cause some of those, they may act on it. I have not done research on itself, but there's a very good point that it's what is the compounds that are generated, the secondary compounds that are generated after the radiation is an important question if it has any potency in terms of health and effect. Now, having said that, this is all about balancing the risk and the benefit. So the question is about, do we get a slightly less THC or a CBD at the cost of removing the fungus and the mycotoxin, right? So that's how we evaluate the risk and benefit. So at the point in time, as of now, with our knowledge on the radiation, I would say that benefit is outweighing that kind of a risk that are likely. There is a reduction in those active compounds and also the secondary metabolites formed or secondary compounds that are formed as a result of irradiation. As of now, with our current understanding, the benefit is higher than these kind of problems or issues that are likely to happen. Yeah.
Nope, that's fantastic. And we are getting close to the end of time, so we don't have to rush. But in case I missed anything, was there anything else you wished I'd asked about the study or any future work, anything else you think our audience needs to know about what you've been doing with cannabis and irradiation and mycoplasm and mycotoxins, any of those?
I have a couple of points I just wanted to say. One is, if at all you are using cannabis, make sure that it is procured through the proper channel, because it makes a huge difference. And if you are a medical practitioner, ensure that the quality of the produce that you are prescribing to the patients is good, and you are confident that there is not in the levels of mycotoxins or the spores are taken care of. So basically obtained through a good quality produce growers. And another thing is, if you are a grower, if you are actually listening to this, I would say like there are solutions. Obviously, once mycotoxin is entering the supply chain, it is very hard to get rid of it, or the fungus if you are entering the. So the key is to prevent the fungus from entering in the supply chain and establishing the growth. So you have to do all by your means to actually avoid that kind of thing. At the growing stage, we have solutions. That is our future work, or the current ongoing work is basically identifying those kind of bacteria. They are the friendly bacteria that actually are like just now Mamta mentioned. They will reduce the requirement of pesticide and fungicide, because there is also a limit of pesticide residues that can be present. And also they promote the growth of the plant, so there is benefit. So basically we are turning to nature itself to find solution for those kind of problems. So there are solutions that nature actually gives us. So it is only us to find out an effective way, a sustainable, cost-effective way of implementing it. And that's what we are right now working on. We are not just identifying the bacteria that help the plant to grow or control the fungus, but also making sure that industry the applicability is, it is feasible and the cost is feasible. So that's what we are right now working on. And I would ask Mamta to add on something.
I will request the regulatory agencies to look more into it. It should not be like treated as other food,
any other commodity.
Other commodities. It should be also. It needs to be exposure. There should be more report exposure route specific, like because some people eat it, some people inhale it. So it should be treated like. The report should be differentiated, and there should be more control on the levels, because right now what we have everywhere in US, in Europe, everywhere the standards are same as for other food commodities. It should be treated because the consumption ways are very different, and the consumers are different as compared to food items. We cannot keep in the same one, so there should be different regulation. And all the toxins, like according to depending on the limits and depending on the consequences of the exposure, they should be kept in different categories. Like aflatoxin is very toxic, and DON, deoxynivalenol, should be treated differently. So all toxins should have different, and there should be, for the total yeast and mold, there should be zero tolerance. So especially for the immunocompromised people, there should be regulatory agencies should prepare like really clear, because there is no clear documents in any website. So there should be very clear documentation available for public.
Yeah. Product differentiation for the stringent quality control and the regulatory framework. Great, thank you. I mean, that's a good way to actually end this discussion there.
I agree. That was really good. Thank you very much. Okay, Kirk. So I'll do my quick summary, and then I'm going to ask you some questions as a grower. So, irradiation works for getting rid of stuff we don't want growing on cannabis. It gets rid of mold, it gets rid of bacteria. It might actually blow up some of the endotoxins that the molds have produced afterwards, and definitely can kill them before it produces it. Gets rid of some of the spores, which are tiny little really hard things that molds turn into when they're sort of just waiting, and can be sometimes really hard to get rid of. So irradiation works.
Well,
but
just clarification on terminology. You're saying gets rid of. Does it actually rid the cannabis of the mold, or is it just detoxify
it? Kills it.
So the dead carcasses of those molds and are still on the plant.
Those microbes are still there, and my understanding from the paper is some of the endotoxins. So, endotoxin is just a poison, a famous one, because it sort of came up in the paper because some of the fungus they found on the mold was penicillium, and yes, you recognize that because penicillium fungus makes penicillin, which is something I use in the pharmacy every day. It's an antibiotic, but penicillium produces penicillin to kill other living things like bacteria and mold around it when they're fighting for a food source. So, fighting for a food source is one of the reasons that molds produce toxins. So the irradiation, and here's my understanding, and this gets a little weaker, can actually disrupt / break down some of the toxin as well. I'm getting a little fuzzy on that one, but it definitely can kill the microbes, especially the fungus that produce these endotoxins.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it kills these, and so but as we mentioned, why do we care? We care especially for our immunosuppressed people who might be using this as medicine. So, the examples, HIV, cancer chemotherapy. So there's several different groups of medicinal patients who, for whatever reason, our immune system isn't working so well. And there's not a ton of examples, but there's definitely have been some case studies of these people inhaling spores and the spores causing an infection in them. Again, it's not an epidemic of this, but it has happened. So my takeaway from this paper is, although irradiation works, we should probably do some more, we being probably Health Canada, some more testing in different ways on the cannabis to see after it's been, hopefully grown in a nice sterile way, and then decontaminated with something like irradiation to see if there's any mold and other nasty microbes on it before it goes out to the public, especially the medical public. So that's my sort of summary.
Yeah. It's funny, but every time we see studies on cannabis, there's always that we should do more studies. However, on this one, okay, I'm going to take a step backwards. First of all, gamma radiation, irradiation. What's the difference between irradiation and radiation terminology? What's irradiation versus radiation?
An eye.
Okay, it's the same thing.
No, I think so. And someone can call and yell at me. I think radiation is just something that comes out from something, like you can be radiating heat, etc. And I think irradiation is when we sort of focus it at something.
It's the verb. It's the verb. It's the action. Okay.
Sure.
Okay. So this is an industry standard. So am I to believe that all commercial weed, medical and recreational weed, gets irradiated in the process of being sold and packaging? Like, where does this come into play in the whole process of getting commercial weed?
I don't know if you have it, like if you are Greencraft Cannabis here in Dauphin, I don't know that you have to get it irradiated, but my understanding is you have to pass Health Canada, thou shall have less than so many units of mold in your stuff. Like, it's going to be tested, and they are going to test for this mold. And so one of the, you could just grow it in completely sterile conditions. There are, we've talked to Eric and other growers who sort of unleash other bugs on their product to eat things like mold. So there's different ways to get rid of it, but irradiation is very effective, but I don't think there's any rule saying you have to have it. And when would it be done? Again, someone can call or yell at me, but my understanding would be they're just before or possibly after packaging. One of the nice things about irradiation is, depending on the packaging, you could put it in the package and then irradiate it. But I am willing to be yelled at about the order if someone wants to send us some nasty emails.
Okay, yeah, that's when I was researching this episode, I could not find a reference to say how often, except to say that gamma irradiation is an industry standard for sterilizing medicinal and recreational cannabis. It does not fully eliminate the toxic fungus or their chemical residues. And what this study determined is that's what they found, is that you can irradiate your cannabis, but not it's not fully effective. And again, as you said, if you are a healthy individual, it's most likely not a problem. However,
But I want
if
to jump in
you,
real quick because
yep,
that sort of reminded me of something. Is someone might say, well, why do we go with irradiation at all? Because if you think about the other ways to, we'll call it sterilize the cannabis, well, what could you do? Well, you could heat it. Well, then we start blowing up terpenes and other things. Well, you could put a bunch of chemicals on it. Well, then how do you get them back out? Like getting rid of the fungus and the bacteria off of another living thing is hard. And for another industry, the spice industry has been used. So another sort of natural grown product that might have bad things growing on it is sterilized with irradiation. So, and they hinted at that a little bit in this, that cannabis right now is kind of held to a food standard. So like with spices, for the amount of other bad things growing on it, where they're thinking, maybe there should be a different standard for stuff that's inhaled, which I don't know the answer, but it sounds like a very interesting point. But yeah, I don't know where I was going with this, but yeah, just the reason irradiation is good, useful tool is, the idea is, and people said hate mail my way, is we can get rid of the bad living things on another living thing without destroying the cannabis.
yeah, it's again, it's a small study.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense of what they did and how they did it, and people can get into the study. We'll have it on the webpage. To bring this more home, as I was walking my dog, I was listening to your interview with the two PhD doctors, and I kept trying to think of how does this relate to my little grow up, that my medicinal cannabis that I grow, and also how does it affect the person that goes. So, like, is this something to be fearful? Should I fear this now when I go and buy my cannabis? But I guess in my perspective, to put this into a clinical perspective, as a nurse, of course, I don't want people to have moldy cannabis. And to put this into layman's term, mold is everywhere, right? If you leave your bread out too long, you'll get mold on it. If you have water in the basement, there could be mold growing in the basement. So mold grows in humidity. One of the faults of my garden is it might be too dry. I don't have a humidifier in my tent, so I'm running a really dry operation, which I have to learn to improve later down the road. But so mold for me, although I do grow in soil, I have an indoor grow and I grow in soil because I like it. It's a little less work for me, but I break some rules. I bring in the compost and soil from my back garden, and I might be bringing mold into it. This is what I'm learning from this.
You're
So
almost guaranteed, because just
I'm
to add,
guaranteed.
I'm not guaranteed. Like mold is everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah. So I'm guaranteed to bring mold into my garden. So how do I have to take care of it? This is what I have to apply. And I guess I clean my tent. I do all that. I clean everything. And I also have a method of taking. I don't have living soil. I know people that grow in living soil, so this would be a concern for them. So I guess it's the whole point is to just keep the dampness down and be aware of it and how you're curing it. And I guess this is all about using your nose, because you can smell mold. You can't always see it, but you can smell dampness. So I guess as a home grower, I'm going to be very aware of how I cure my stuff, where I cure my stuff, the humidity of where I cure it, and all this sort of stuff. Because it's one of those things where I went, well, come on, don't make me worry about this now. Uh, you
Well,
know?
and I think that brings up a really good point. Recreational users, do we care? And honestly, after this, I'm not sure. Maybe if we can find some experts who can tell us if we should care. But again, we're not saying people should go seek out moldy. If you have a moldy batch of pot, maybe throw it out. But there's going to be fungus that you can't smell, that you couldn't detect
Yes.
without some of the fancy stuff that was mentioned in this paper. If you are otherwise healthy, do you care? If you are doing a traditional smoking of a joint, how much of the mold is just gotten rid of by the fact it is burnt? Now, I guarantee some of the spores aren't, because that's kind of the definition of a spore, is they're really hardy and they resist everything, because that's the whole
Well,
point.
but they don't resist heat. Mold can resist freezing. A spore can
Yes.
freeze and come, but my understanding of mold is that they don't resist heat. Like if you
Right,
heat mold, they'll
but
kill.
to at some point. But spores, that's kind of their reason for being, is when a mold is some types of mold are trying to reproduce, they form a spore. And a
Yeah,
spore is a little armored vehicle of mold that should resist, dryness, cold, some heat. So, if you got, and then when it gets to a nice moist place like the inside of your lungs,
yeah,
then it can
yeah.
start doing its thing again. Honestly, if I don't bore everybody with this episode, if I can find some researcher out there who can answer my question of, does it matter if you've got a little bit of mold in your joint, I would love to talk to them, because I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, no, I think the answer to that is intuitively, I'm going to say, no, you don't want mold in your joint. You don't want a spore in your lung. Um, but again, I have studied this stuff back in the day. And again, what I like about some of these geeky papers you bring is it challenges me to go back to my biology and my pathophysiology courses that when I was 19, 20, 21 years old, I wasn't always too much into. But now that I've got 40 years of practice and I can relate some of that knowledge to actually clinical situations, it's almost like I wish I go to school after your clinical experience, because it's the
Yeah,
clinical
yeah.
experience anyways, I digress. So I believe, and this comes back from talking to a chef. I think I've talked about Rick Harrison. Rick Harrison was probably one of the reasons why I started this podcast with you. And I think I told stories about Rick really early. He was a friend of mine that died of cancer in the early aughts, and he was a medicinal cannabis user at the time. He was also a Red Seal chef, and we used to brew together. And we talked about spores and funguses, as you do when you're brewing beer. And I do remember him talking about the heat. And yeah, you're talking about spores, but spores are just the seeds of a fungus, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I can remember
sure.
seeing videos. They're just the seeds, right? So I believe heat. So I like I say to you, if someone's out there that can talk to us, I think if you're decarboxylizing your cannabis as you inhale it, you are killing the spores. I'm going to say that's my understanding. I'm not going to say it's true. It's just my understanding of mold. But I think if you're vaping your whole flower, that might be another issue, because vapes are a little lower temperatures. However, it's a cool story. Here's a question though. There's another paper that you want us to put on our webpage, and it's
Yeah.
about cannabinoids.
Yeah, so maybe I just want, maybe this cold morning in Manitoba, I'm just looking for hate mail. When the headline about this study came out and we put it up on our social media feeds, we got a lot of feedback, but the feedback was mostly about irradiation, not whether or not it kills off all the fungus. Fungus was a secondary thing. What people got excited about was whether or not you should irradiate cannabis at all, and the thought that irradiating cannabis destroys, half of the cannabinoids in it. So I threw a paper in, and Kirk will put it up on the website, that says no. Irradiating cannabis does not destroy the cannabinoids. Yes, it's just one paper, and yes, like I said, I'm maybe just bringing on the hate mail, but I think it's important for people to, is irradiating cannabis getting rid of the cannabinoids or terpenoids or flavonoids, or is that a myth? Is it something we should really be worried about? It's, to me, it's a bit of an open question, but the study I found to, share with the rest of you says no. But, if you've got some study, or you even more exciting, if you are a researcher out there who's done studies that says, yeah, radiation is terrible to the cannabis plant, we would love to know about that.
Yeah. So here, have they done a longitudinal study of hockey player families in Pinawa who ate cookies that were irradiated?
None of them have hair anymore. I don't know what happened.
The whole hockey team has no hair anymore.
No, 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 very, very, very not true. But yeah, no, yeah. Well, my running joke for many years was, the Simpsons were misnamed as really the Shoefelts, growing up next to a reactor. But yeah, no, lots of. I guess I've had a few different experiences growing up than your average bear because nuclear research facility.
It was right in my backyard. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think also a little similar to Stranger Things, with that weird
Ah.
facility out in the bush. Well, we had one of those too. So
It's interesting. I grew yeah, I grew up on the West Coast, and in high school I took environmental studies programs, and I can remember the can-do reactor guy came to our class one day, and that's what you grew. Did you grow
yeah,
up near a can-do?
yeah, can do.
Yeah, and he
Vanadium,
came.
deuterium, uranium.
Is that what it is, Ken? Do well.
Yeah,
He came to our class, and it was a good presentation. And to this day, I believe nuclear reaction and electricity is probably the most efficient electricity we can produce, and every house should have a little reactor on its roof. I kind of believe that. However, there's one flaw yet. What do you do with the toxic waste? And
you put.
that's you
Well,
put it
that's why I
deep
have
into the
everyone mad at you. You put it in the ground.
yeah with
Not too many kilometers away from the WNRE.
yeah
The
yeah
the reactor was the URL, the Underground Research Lab, where no, we didn't actually put any reactive stuff down there, but they were doing experiments on what would happen if you put stuff in. So anyway,
it's
grew up
so
next to a
interesting.
research reactor. Did a couple summers at URL. Again, hate mail. Bring
Yeah,
bring it on.
bring it on. All right, man.
So,
This
but
this this has been
this
good.
has
So
been fun.
we're going to irradiate our cannabis now, and even if we irradiate it, the conclusion of the story is that it doesn't kill all the spores.
Maybe they should. Yeah, back to the
Yeah.
actual thing. Irradiation works really well, but it's not 100%
Yeah.
sterilizing. So maybe Health Canada should consider different testing, different
Yeah.
amounts of testing, different types of testing. And the other I thought really interesting during our conversation is, should there be sort of a different standard for stuff that's inhaled versus sort of the
Yeah.
regular
Yeah.
food amount of fungus and endotoxins allowed in stuff that goes in our bodies.
Well, another
So
geeky one.
another geeky one. I loved all of it. I'm Trevor Schufeld. I'm the pharmacist.
I'm Kirk Nyquist. I'm a registered nurse, and we are Reefer Medicine the podcast. Both of these papers will be on the episode webpage, reefermed.ca. We have a blog page there. I get to give my opinions about public health and the healthcare system and how cannabis is related to well-being. Trevor tolerates it, and
No, no. Storytelling and opinions are good.
yeah, so go to our webpage, and also from our webpage, you can hit all of the references. Everything we do is referenced. Yeah, off we go. We got lots of little projects on the go, and stand by and follow us on social media. We're on LinkedIn, and Trevor's been having an awful lot of fun with posting lately, and I never know what's going to come up. I even go to the webpage to find out the social media to find out what we're talking about. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, no, we've been doing a couple new things. Check us out on the social medias, and it's been another good one. We'll talk to everybody later.